Message on the mirror. The hallway seemed darker than before. The dim lights flickered weakly as she walked down the narrow corridor, her footsteps echoing faintly. Lily paused for a moment before the door, hesitating as her hand hovered over the doorknob. Then she slowly opened the door and stepped inside. The familiar chill hit her as she entered the apartment. She was ready to leave this place behind. As she walked through the living room, she caught a glimpse of herself in one of the mirrors. Her reflection looked almost unfamiliar, distorted by the unease she felt. Lily looked away, trying to focus on packing her belongings. Walking down the hallway, she came across an old mirror covered in dust, one she had never noticed before. It sat at the end of the hallway, almost forgotten beneath its dusty covering. She moved closer to the mirror. It was coated with a thick layer of dust, but something about it drew her attention. Slowly, she pulled the cloth away. She shuddered at what she saw. Written faintly in the dust on the mirror were the words, "Hello," and just below it, "I like you." Lily held her breath as she stared at the mirror. Had it always been there? She tried to reason with herself, convincing herself. It must have been there for a long time. She shook her head, trying to ignore the growing paranoia. Lily went into the bedroom, hastily gathering her belongings to pack and leave. As she passed the bathroom, a sudden chill ran down her spine. She stopped, slowly turning her head to look inside. Lily's heart skipped a beat. The bathroom sink faucet was running. She was certain she hadn't left it on. She cautiously stepped into the bathroom, her eyes fixed on the mirror. A message appeared on the fogged glass. "You are mine." Lily froze in terror. She had heard horror stories about people secretly living in others' homes. Was she unknowingly a victim? Trembling, she reached out to turn off the faucet. Slowly, she extended her hand and touched the surface of the mirror. She was shocked to feel a small latch, and the mirror suddenly moved, swinging open like a door. Lily staggered backward as the mirror revealed a hidden space behind it, larger and darker than she could have ever imagined. Then her heart nearly stopped. A face emerged from the darkness. It was a man, his hair disheveled, his wide eyes and a toothy grin, the shadows seemingly swallowing his body, making him appear as just a floating head. Below, the floor was cluttered with clothes, various trash, and some personal belongings. Panic surged through her. Lily turned, grabbed her keys, and bolted out of the bathroom. Lily burst through the front door of the building. She ran to her car, slammed the door shut, locked it, and called the police. The police arrived quickly. The man was eventually caught, still wearing that unnerving, unnatural smile. The police searched the apartment. They discovered a hidden space behind the bathroom mirror containing personal items, canned food, and things Lily recognized as her own. The man had been living there, watching her, moving around the apartment whenever she was out. When they apprehended him, he refused to explain or answer any questions from the police, sometimes sulking, other times aggressive, appearing mentally unstable. Lily felt incredibly lucky that the man was merely an agitated intruder and not a murderer. Otherwise, things could have been far worse. She started the car, glancing at the apartment one last time. Then she drove away, leaving the apartment and its horrors behind. The madman on the highway. This memory stands out because it left me anxious and panicked for years. I used to work as a delivery driver for Amazon. I would drive to delivery locations, and one time I was driving on the highway near nightfall. The weather was cloudy, with thunder rumbling, though it hadn't started raining yet. The fuel indicator began blinking as a warning. The highway stretched ahead, desolate, surrounded by dark forests. I checked the map and saw a gas station 15 minutes away. I decided to try my luck, skipping a crowded gas station, a decision that turned out to be one of my biggest mistakes. Following the GPS directions, I turned onto a dusty road surrounded by trees. The bumpy path made it difficult to drive faster. And then I saw him. A man standing on the roadside, dressed in tattered clothes. His scarred, filthy skin stared intently at me, thinking he might need help. And this was my second mistake. I stopped, the car halting just a few feet from the man. I rolled the window down slightly and leaned out. "Are you okay, buddy?" The man didn't reply, but growled. His voice was strange. I had never heard anything like it. It was more like fragmented howls coming from his mouth. I stepped out of the car, which was yet another mistake. As I exited the car, the man stepped closer before stopping. I asked again if he needed help, but this time, something changed. The man dropped to all fours, like a predator ready to attack, and began crawling toward me with a malicious grin. Before I could process what was happening, I ran toward my car, and the man started crawling after me. He crawled relentlessly toward me, his sinister grin widening, his eyes locked on me. Panic surged within me. I could hear his maniacal laughter behind me, but before he reached me, I got into the car and locked the door. I pressed the clutch, my hands trembling as I tried to start the engine. But as I mentioned, the road was in terrible condition. I didn't see a large ditch on the right. My car suddenly sped forward, the right tire dropping into the ditch, creating a jolt that left my vehicle stuck. Beads of sweat formed on my forehead as I looked at the dusty road ahead, surrounded by dense forest. The only way I could escape now was to get out of the car. Suddenly, there was a knock right next to my car window. I turned around slowly, but there was no one there. The hood of my car suddenly sank. Then he jumped onto the roof of my car, pressing his terrifying face against the windshield, sticking out his tongue and leaving streaks of saliva. I gagged. The sight was unbearable. The man laughed, his mouth opened wide, revealing sharp teeth. He whispered through the glass, his voice echoing in the air.
"I'd love to torture you until you vomit blood."
My hand fumbled for the phone, dialing 911. My voice trembled as I spoke to the dispatcher, pleading for help. I knew it would take at least 10 to 15 minutes for the police to arrive. As I hung up, the man began climbing off my car's roof. I checked all the car doors and felt a slight relief knowing they were locked. The man reached my car window, trying to open the door. Then he turned around and started searching for something on the ground. After a few minutes, he stopped and picked up a large rock. He threw the rock at the window. The glass cracked under the impact, but didn't break. I screamed, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "Stop, please. What did I ever do to you?" He just smiled, his eyes wide and wild, and raised the rock again. Then a loud, piercing horn sounded. The bright headlights of another vehicle illuminated the crazed man. He froze, his face going blank, and set the rock down. The man locked eyes with me one last time. He leaned closer to the window and said,
"Looks like today's your lucky day. If you ever pass through here again, don't forget to pick me up."
He turned around and ran, disappearing into the forest. The truck stopped beside my car, and the driver jumped out to help. The world blurred, and then everything went dark. I had fainted in the car. That day, the police told me they had found several abandoned vehicles whose owners had inexplicably left them behind. They also reported 3 missing persons cases. They said they couldn't find any terrifying man matching my description. I don't know where he is now, but to all delivery drivers and night drivers, never stop for anyone suspicious, especially when driving alone in a remote area. The shadow of an eccentric person. Maggie had been staying at her friend's apartment in this remote town for the past few weeks. The old apartment was the perfect escape for her from the chaos of life, but the peace she sought was quickly overshadowed. by an odd, unsettling feeling that seemed to linger in the walls. Lily moved around the living room, tidying up a bit. She noticed there were quite a few mirrors hanging on the walls, as her friend was a collector of mirrors. But those mirrors gave her an inescapable feeling that they held something more. As she passed by one of the mirrors, for a brief moment, she felt as though something, or someone, was staring at her. She wasn't sure and brushed it off. Maybe it was just her imagination. She picked up a few scattered items from the coffee table and walked down the hallway to the bathroom. That night, Lily prepared to take a bath. She was tired and wanted to relax, to forget the strange feeling creeping into her thoughts. She turned on the faucet to fill the bathtub, steam filling the room. But as she was waiting for the tub to fill, her eyes suddenly caught sight of the mirror above the sink. She felt as if something was moving. Maggie startled, turning around, but there was no one in the room. The air was heavy with silence. A shiver ran down her spine, and she quickly exited the bathroom, her thoughts spinning. She tried to convince herself that it was nothing, just stress from being alone in a strange place. One night, as she was about to drift off to sleep, she noticed a noise, or something moving. A shadow was cast on the floor. She felt an unease unlike anything she'd ever experienced. She didn't dare move. Her anxiety grew. Suddenly, the feeling of being watched became unbearable. Maggie turned, opened her eyes, and there he was, a tall, pale, gaunt man with sunken eyes standing right behind her. Maggie jumped up, rushed to turn on the bedside lamp, but her hand slipped, and she knocked it over. As the lights flickered, the room lit up intermittently, but she couldn't see anyone. Then everything didn't stop. Shortly after, she heard a soft tapping on the window behind her. Maggie hesitated, then gathered her courage and opened the curtain, but there was no one there. She panicked. It felt like a staged prank, as though something terrible was happening. She tried once again to shake it off and left the bedroom, but she didn't realize a man had appeared, standing silently, staring at her. He didn't move, just stared at her with eerie stillness. Days passed, and she began losing track of time, her mental state deteriorating. The reflection of the man started appearing more often, sometimes standing motionless at the end of the hallway. But this time, it wasn't just a shadow at the end of the hallway. For the first time, he physically appeared, a tall, gaunt figure with hollow eyes, dressed in filthy, tattered clothes. Fear consumed her as she backed into the corner of the room. He was slowly approaching, his face twisted into a sinister grin. In horror, he lunged at her. Maggie was shoved into the large mirror, shattering it into a cacophony of sharp, piercing noise. As she fought back, the man screamed,
"You will be mine."
He gripped her wrists tightly, but in the chaos, he momentarily lost focus, distracted by his own delusions. Desperate to free herself, Maggie grabbed a shard of broken glass and, with all her strength, stabbed his hand. He howled in pain and released her. Maggie seized the moment of his distraction to escape. She ran out of the apartment, calling for help from anyone nearby. Soon, the police surrounded the apartment, and he was captured. He was an abnormal, deranged individual who had been living in an abandoned house nearby for years. He was arrested and placed in a psychiatric facility after being diagnosed with severe mental instability and a history of violent behavior. The police believed he had been stalking Maggie for weeks before his outburst. Even though he was captured, she couldn't shake the feeling that the mirrors in the house still reflected something strange. The trauma lingered within her, and it would take a long time for her to recover. Run away from strangers. The grocery store sat in the middle of a vast, empty parking lot, bathed in dim streetlight. It was 2 a.m. The store was closed, and an eerie quiet surrounded the building. I was the night shift manager here. Usually things were calm, and nothing happened. just me stocking shelves during the quiet hours while the rest of the world slept. I had been working non-stop since my shift began at 10 p.m., trying to get everything done. My focus was broken by a soft knocking sound. It was coming from the front of the store. I left my cart behind and walked toward the sound. Through the large glass windows, I saw him, a man. I approached the glass door. I asked him what he wanted. He demanded I open the door. His face was expressionless, devoid of a smile, just cold eyes staring at me. I told him the store was closed and he couldn't stay here. As I turned to leave, a loud bang made me whip around. The man's fists pounded the glass, over and over, each hit louder and angrier than the last. This guy wasn't just some harmless drifter. I pulled out my phone, threatening to call the police. Only then did he step back, his eyes still locked on me, full of rage. He slowly walked into the darkness of the parking lot. The tension in me eased slightly. He was gone. I put my phone away and tried to refocus on my work. 15 minutes passed. The knocking, the pounding, the man, all faded from my mind as I got lost in stocking the shelves. But then I heard metal breaking, like something being torn apart. I abandoned my cart and ran toward the front, fear swelling in my chest. My heart sank as I saw the glass door slightly ajar. The latch, the only thing keeping the door secure, was gone. Fear engulfed me as I realized what this meant. I needed to get to the office and call the police immediately. I turned to run toward the office, but I froze in place. Standing not far from me, blocking my path, was that man. His expression hadn't changed. It was still the same cold, deadly, furious stare. I didn't think. I just ran. I dashed through the door, with the man right behind me. Suddenly, an old, battered van screeched into view, speeding toward the front of the store. It swerved recklessly, nearly hitting me as it came to a stop, my heart pounding in my chest. I moved forward, running past the van, but then everything turned upside down. A sudden sharp pain erupted in the back of my head. My body stumbled forward as I collapsed onto the ground. I didn't even have time to process what had happened before everything began to blur. I felt hands grabbing me, roughly lifting me off the cold asphalt. My vision faded, darkness closing in, and the last thing I remembered was the roar of the truck's engine and the sensation of being dragged inside. I woke up to a pounding headache, my wrists tied tightly behind my back. The truck jolted and swayed as it sped down an unfamiliar road. My mind was foggy, disoriented. For a moment, I had no idea where I was. I began piecing it together. The man, the truck. I had been kidnapped. Intruder from the garage. It was just another long, dull day at school, but as I walked home, the excitement of Friday lightened my mood. No school tomorrow. I could finally relax. As I approached my house, I noticed something odd. The garage door was wide open, and the light inside was still on. My dad had left earlier that day for a business trip, so he must have been in a hurry and forgot to close it. I didn't think much of it at the time. I stepped into the garage, turned off the light, and pulled the door shut. The quiet of the house greeted me as I stepped inside, and the thought of having the entire place to myself made me feel free. My mom had gone to a friend's house for the evening, so I was all set for a night of gaming and movies. Hours passed as I got lost in my game. The house was silent, except for the occasional sounds from the TV. I decided to grab a drink, and as I walked into the kitchen, something caught my attention. The garage light was on again. I froze, a strange, eerie feeling creeping over me. Did I forget to turn it off? Or had my mom come back? But I didn't hear her come in. My heart began to race as I approached the garage door, my steps growing heavier. The moment I stepped into the garage, I saw that every drawer in my dad's workshop area was open. His tools were scattered across the floor, as if someone had been frantically searching for something. But no one was there. I hurried back inside, locking the garage door behind me. Something was wrong. I could feel it. I started heading back to the living room, planning to watch TV and try to calm myself down. Then, from behind me, I heard the garage door handle rattling violently. I froze, staring at the door, watching it shake harder and harder, as if someone on the other side was desperately trying to get in. I grabbed my phone, my hands trembling, as I realized I needed to get out of the house. In my panic, I didn't notice that the noise had suddenly stopped. The silence was eerie, too silent. I ran straight for the front door, my only thought being to escape. But as I entered the living room, I froze in my tracks. Someone was there, a large man, his back turned to me. In his hand, he gripped an axe tightly. It must have been taken from my dad's workshop. I held my breath, terrified that he would turn around and see me. The TV was still playing, masking my footsteps, and I knew this was my only chance. Going upstairs was not an option. I quietly turned back and headed for the back door, trying to stay calm. Once outside, I didn't stop running. I hurried across to my neighbor's house. Panicked, I banged on their door until they let me in. I waited there, staring at my house from across the street, praying the intruder wouldn't come looking for me. I pounded on my neighbor's door, and it felt like hours before Mr. Thompson finally opened it, his face etched with confusion. I told him everything that had happened. Mr. Thompson, a retired firefighter with a strong sense of duty, grabbed a flashlight and an old baseball bat. He assured me he would check the house and that everything would be fine. Reluctantly, I stayed behind, watching him cross the street. My body was still shaking with fear. My anxiety grew as I watched, unable to shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. I had called the police. They were on their way, but the thought of that man in my house, wielding my dad's axe, haunted me. I watched as Mr. Thompson cautiously approached the front door, shining his flashlight across the windows and garage. He disappeared inside. I strained to listen for anything, but everything was eerily silent. Suddenly, I saw him step outside. From across the street, his voice echoed faintly. "There's no one in there. The house is empty." A wave of relief washed over me, but I knew I still needed to stay cautious. As Mr. Thompson began walking back toward me, that gnawing sense of unease returned. Before I could voice my concern, a shadow moved behind him. My blood ran cold. The intruder. He was there, emerging from the dark side of the house, the axe glinting faintly under the porch light. I screamed, trying to warn Mr. Thompson, but it was too late. As he turned, the man lunged at him. A fierce struggle broke out. Mr. Thompson swung the baseball bat, but the intruder was strong. The two grappled, the axe coming dangerously close to Mr. Thompson's head as they stumbled across the lawn. My legs wouldn't move, paralyzed with fear, as I watched the horrifying scene unfold. Each second felt like a nightmare. Mr. Thompson managed a strong swing with the bat, striking the man's ribs, but it wasn't enough. The intruder roared in pain, but instead of retreating, he raised the axe, ready to strike. Just as the axe came down, Mr. Thompson threw himself to the side, narrowly dodging the blow. In that brief moment of distraction, Mr. Thompson delivered another blow, knocking the man off balance. I finally decided to rush forward to help, but before I could reach them, the sound of police sirens echoed in the air. He looked up at the sound of the sirens and, using his last ounce of strength, bolted toward the backyard. Mr. Thompson staggered to his feet, gasping for air but still steady. The police arrived just in time, their flashlights cutting through the darkness as they chased after the man. Within minutes, they subdued him. The man thrashed violently, growling like a wild animal, but the police swiftly restrained him, hitting him to the ground and cuffing his hands behind his back. I stood there, trembling, watching the entire scene unfold. Mr. Thompson approached me, clutching his side where he had been hit, but still managing a smile. "It's safe now," he said. I felt an overwhelming gratitude for being saved. I recounted every detail I could remember to the police, but all I wanted was to forget. I sat down on the steps of Mr. Thompson's porch, my body trembling, watching the man sitting in the back of the police car as it drove away. It was over, but the image of the intruder's face, his crazed eyes, and the sound of the axe slicing through the air would haunt me forever. Mr. Thompson sat next to me, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing, kid," he said softly. "It's over now." But deep down, I knew the fear would stay with me. I would never forget how close I came to being caught in the grip of something truly evil. Ghosts at the theater. Jane was a beautiful woman. She often filmed famous or mysterious locations with her crew, doing whatever it took to gain fame. Today, Jane was standing in the bathroom of the Birdcage Theater, also known as the Birdcage Theater in Arizona, which was now out of operation. Surrounded by whispers about the past, she looked in the mirror and applied lipstick with excitement welling up inside her. Hundreds of thousands of followers are waiting for her latest video, and she plans to take them on a dramatic journey about the haunted history of this famous theater. It is famous for its cruel history of violence and death. As she leaned closer to the mirror, something blurred at the edge of her vision. An indistinct shape hovered behind her. Startled, she screamed and quickly turned back to look. That surprise was from her boyfriend, Ken. He responded with an amused and teasing attitude. She started complaining about him scaring her. But after the laughter and teasing, she still felt something truly behind her, making her think about the curses that haunted this place. Ken set up the phone, urging her to start recording, and Jane was ready to begin. Through her journeys exploring haunted houses and places, she had built an online persona as someone who delved into the paranormal. Sharing such stories made her following grow continuously. Her sixth sense leads her to supernatural encounters. She begins to tell the dark, mysterious stories behind this Birdcage Theater. She started passing places like bars and old tables that made her feel a dark energy around her. Jane shivered and continued, recounting stories of gunfights and dreams. Broken ended life here. Suddenly, the piano in the corner played a faint, haunting melody. It was only a few notes, but they seemed to echo endlessly. Jane kept her camera steady, moving toward the staircase. As she climbed the stairs, she suddenly felt like she heard the mournful cry of someone, seemingly a woman. She carefully looked around. There was no one else, or any changes. She started to turn to ask Ken, but it seemed like no one heard that except me. Finally, she reached the theater's dressing room. The room was dark, with faded, peeling wallpaper at the corners. Jane felt a sharp, terrible pain in her heart as she stepped inside. She started sitting against the wall, trying to breathe. Ken worriedly told her to stop, but she was stubborn and determined to have footage at this place. Jane begins to recall the tragic gossip story of Margarita, a dancer and aspiring actress. She is in her prime. She was murdered by her own colleague in this very room. She was stabbed through the heart with a high heel by someone envious of her success. It was said that her spirit haunted the room, seeking revenge or even a way to live again. Despite the lingering pain, Jane was intrigued. She was a bit scared, but couldn't ignore Margarita's ghost story. It would complete her video perfectly. She returned to the bathroom to prepare. When she stood in front of the mirror, something was different. Jane leaned closer, squinting into the darkness. That's when she actually saw something. A ghostly figure stood behind me, his face pale and painted, his eyes sunken and dark. She wore an old dress, her expression a distorted mixture of longing and anger. I feel like maybe it's Margarita. She quickly raised her phone to record a video. The pain returned, piercing her chest like a blade, but Jane persisted in capturing her reflection on the glass. After a while, Ken didn't see Jane anywhere. Worried, he went to check near the restroom. The door was wide open, and he saw Jane acting very strangely. He was shocked to see Jane standing in front of the mirror, talking to herself, and he asked if she was okay. She slowly turned to look at Ken from head to toe and said, "Who are you?" Her words sounded strange, foreign. Her eyes widened in confusion. He chuckled awkwardly, thinking I was pulling one of my usual dark jokes. Clearly, there was some truth being overlooked. Ken led that girl out of the theater, unaware that his real girlfriend was trapped in the mirror, freeing a vengeful spirit. Jane was bound to this place with no escape. She screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the darkness. Unheard, she felt the weight of centuries pressing down on her. She was trapped. Perhaps she had been possessed when Jane started filming Margarita. Margarita had stolen Jane's life and identity, and now she was out in the world, free to pursue the fame that had been taken from her long ago. In the days that followed, Jane's social media was filled with increasingly strange and terrifying posts. Her followers loved the change, but no one knew they weren't following Jane, they were following Margarita, who was dead and now replacing Jane. The haunting of invisible ghosts. Henry slowly woke up with a strange feeling, something rough rubbing against his face. It took a moment for Henry to open his eyes and realize it was Boss licking his face. Henry remembered the last time he couldn't find his dog, but after everything that happened, seeing Boss made him feel more at ease. Henry groaned, his whole body aching as he struggled to sit up. Everything felt too stiff, the joints rigid, and the muscles dull with pain, as if she had actually lunged at him, clawing and piercing into his flesh. Boss whimpered softly, his gaze fixed on the bedroom door. Henry glanced over and saw nothing unusual, but he couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that something strange was inside his own home. Days passed in a vague exhaustion. Every night, it was the same. Boss sat in front of the bedroom door, staring, ears pricked up as if waiting for something. Then, like clockwork, at that exact hour, he would start barking, the sound echoing throughout the house, jolting Henry from his restless sleep. He would get up, gun in hand, and search the house, but he never found anything. The house remained silent, the darkness unchanged. He tried to convince himself that it was just Boss being protective, or perhaps reacting to something normal outside. One night, the barking started again, more intense than ever. He jumped up, hurried down the stairs, gun at the ready, and froze at the sight before him. There, near the living room window, Mari was standing. Her face was gentle, hair flowing in the wind. Henry was paralyzed, an uncontrollable feeling swelling within him. Henry hadn't seen her in years. For the first time in months, he felt a sense of comfort. Boss fell silent, his barking turning into a faint whimper, as if something wasn't quite right ahead. He slowly approached the window, but then something changed. Henry stepped back as Mari's gentle form began to fade, her features distorting, as if cracking horribly, her joints twisting grotesquely, unnaturally. Her eyes seemed to darken, sinking into her face. Her mouth stretched into a wide grin, revealing sharp teeth, with black slime oozing through the cracks in her face. He suddenly realized she had come, perhaps deceiving him and appearing in the form of Mari's spirit. He knew that couldn't be his wife. The figure by the window vanished, dissolving into the darkness like smoke. Henry rushed outside, desperately searching for her, or it, whatever he had just seen. He circled the house, calling for Mari, as if somehow she might still be there, but there was no one. As Henry turned the corner of the barn, he suddenly felt an icy chill. The world around him seemed to shift. The night grew unnaturally dark. It felt like the darkness was swallowing the farm. He heard a whisper, soft and mocking.
Henry.
It was her voice, but distorted and broken, drawing him toward the barn. Henry pushed open the barn door, and there she was again, Mari standing motionless. The whispers grew louder around him.
Come home, Henry. It's time.
The voice echoed from every direction. The darkness closed in, pulling him to his knees as if hypnotized to obey. Her form began to twist again, skin peeling away, revealing a skeletal grin beneath. The barn door slammed shut behind Henry with a piercing noise, swallowing the faint light of the moon. The air filled with voices chanting Henry's name, full of malice. He stumbled back, desperate to escape, but the ground beneath him gave way, sending him plunging into a deep, cold pit. He landed hard on a damp surface. Henry reeled from the overwhelming stench of decay, and as he looked around, rotting corpses, with sunken eyes, stared back at him. He tried to climb out, but the walls of the pit were slick. The bodies began to move, their skeletal hands reaching out, grabbing Henry's legs, pulling him down. A grotesque figure emerged from the darkness above. It was her again, a monstrous version of Mari. Limbs elongated, her smile impossibly wide, filled with jagged, blackened teeth.
Henry, it's time to join us,
she said. Then suddenly, Henry found himself in Mari's old room. The figure leaned closer, its icy breath brushing against his skin.
You can't escape, Henry.
He felt an unnatural pressure tightening around his neck, and he couldn't move. As his vision darkened, it was slowly taking control of him. The first light of dawn crept over the farm. The house lay still and cold, its windows dark and empty. Boss lingered on the porch, his mournful howl echoing across the silent fields. No one knew what really happened. Henry was gone, or perhaps he was still there, but no longer himself. Vengeance of the Soul. It was Saturday night, and Hannah was still at her university library, finishing a project due next week. Her friend had ditched her again, leaving her to finish it all on her own. She checked the clock and saw it was nearly 10 p.m., so she closed her textbooks and returned them to the shelf. Hannah went back to the table and put her books in her bag, and at that moment, she heard a noise. She looked around and thought she saw a man staring at her, but when she blinked, he was gone. Hannah left and headed home. She knew she shouldn't wander alone in a new city. Then she heard footsteps behind her and turned around, seeing a figure in a dark hoodie disappearing into an alleyway. She stopped, feeling a surge of fear. Was someone following her? She hurried on, relieved that her apartment was nearby. Hannah got into her building safely. She stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the 14th floor. Just as the doors were closing, someone reached in to stop them. She held her breath as the doors opened, and a tall, fairly handsome man stepped into the elevator, his dark eyes looking at her with a warm expression. He started a friendly conversation, complimenting her outfit. She blushed, feeling a bit nervous. The elevator stopped on the 13th floor, and he stepped out, looking back at her and saying, "See you around." But as the doors started to close, Hannah saw him reach into his coat and pull out a shiny knife. Realizing the danger, she pulled out her phone as the elevator reached her floor. But just as she dialed the last digit for the police, the doors opened again. She screamed as she saw the man standing at the door, with nowhere left to run. He plunged the knife into her chest, her sweater soaking with blood. Pain spread across her chest as everything faded to black. The next morning, neighbors found Hannah dead in the elevator. Residents raised concerns about safety measures. Security cameras were installed, and more importantly, an emergency stop button was added to the elevator. Months passed, and the elevator killer remained uncaught. He prided himself on getting away with the perfect murder and wondered if he could pull it off again in the same building. He chose another Saturday night and saw a woman waiting to enter the elevator. He stood behind her, ensuring the guard was still distracted by his game on his phone. He pulled his hoodie tighter over his head as he noticed the camera. The doors opened and the woman stepped inside. Just like before, she pressed 14, and he said he lived on the 13th floor as he pressed the button. But the woman didn't respond. She seemed strange, her head bowed, her hair covering most of her face. She wore a white dress and was barefoot, which he found odd, but her appearance didn't concern him. He kept a knife in his pocket, eager to use it. The 13th floor arrived, and he began to step out. He was ready to repeat what he'd done before, but as he turned back, he realized she was no longer in the elevator. Confusion crossed his face. He was certain she'd been there, but now the elevator was empty. He went in to check. The elevator door suddenly closed, and the overhead lights crunched and dimmed. He heard a hiss. The man felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up as a chill ran down his spine. The guy looked up, and his eyes widened. The woman was crawling on the ceiling, her hair growing long and slithering like a snake. Her eyes were bloodshot, and her smiling mouth revealed many sharp teeth. He noticed a blood stain on her sweater and realized she was Hannah, the woman he had murdered. Hannah's spirit reached out, grabbing his neck, savoring his terror. Then Hannah pulled him into her bloody mouth, her razor-sharp teeth waiting for him. His screams echoed within the metallic confines of the elevator, but no one heard. The killer became nothing more than a memory, consumed by the very spirit he had created. The neighbor's dark secret. Everything started again when I walked past my neighbor's house. My steps slowed as I glanced at his front door, catching sight of a hand pressed against the glass, moving frantically. The glass was old and foggy. I saw someone inside, exhaling and writing help on the dust-covered window. For a second, I turned away, rushing back home. I didn't want to know what was happening behind that door. Back in bed, I couldn't sleep. The image of that pleading face, the desperate scrawl on the window, kept replaying in my mind. The sounds, the black bag, the screams. If I reported this to the police, I knew he'd find a way to cover it up, like he always did. Without evidence, everything would be pointless. I needed a clear and specific plan. I decided to reach out to my friend. I met my friend at the local cafe and explained everything, detailing the strange events and horrific scenes. He looked at me, skeptical, but didn't dismiss it right away. We had known each other for so long, neither of us wanted to believe this was happening. Then he suggested gathering photo and video evidence using advanced technology to avoid detection. I had to do whatever it took to prove my words. Neither of us could imagine what we were about to do next. But I promised him that we would only collect evidence and leave quickly and discreetly. The next morning, I put on a plumber's uniform and a fake mustache, mentally preparing for my decision. I approached my neighbor's door, disguised as a plumber. He opened it, eyeing me strangely, scrutinizing. He glanced at my house, then back at me, asking, "Nick, is that you?" I froze for a moment. I began faking my voice, using a different tone to deceive him, explaining I was sent to check and fix the city's main water pipes. At first, he seemed suspicious and told me to wait a moment before closing the door. I stood outside, not knowing what he was doing inside, waiting and adjusting my glasses. But eventually, He acted friendly and allowed me inside. As I entered, the house was much tidier than I had expected, and nothing suggested he was a murderer. As I pretended to inspect the pipes under his kitchen sink, he stayed close, following me throughout the house. My every move was under his watch. I hadn't anticipated this. His presence was a constant reminder that one wrong move could be my last. I racked my brain for a way to separate myself from him. Then, an idea struck. I asked him to let me check the pipes in the basement, explaining that I needed to inspect the pipes there, adding, "If you come with me, you'll need to be careful. A broken pipe could be very dangerous and make things worse." He hesitated, but finally, he allowed me to go down to the basement alone. I watched his shadow disappear into the darkness. I turned my attention to the house, moving quietly, looking through every corner, hoping to find something out of place. And then I saw it, an edge jutting out along a wall, as if something was being hidden. My fingers brushed along the edge, feeling the rough texture beneath my hand. With a gentle push, the panel creaked open, releasing a foul stench that made me nauseous. I hesitated. Well, would I pro? The smell was nearly unbearable, but curiosity overpowered my fear. I cautiously stepped closer, peering inside. There, in the dim light, I saw a long streak on the floor leading to black bundles that were oozing blood. Then I saw dozens of bodies, skeletal remains intertwined with decomposing corpses. Just as I was about to turn and escape, a cold hand gripped my shoulder. "Hello, my neighbor," a familiar voice whispered in my ear, full of malice. I felt the pressure of his grip tightening, but before I could react, he shoved me forward, standing in front of the door, blocking my only exit. His eyes showed satisfaction. I reached for my phone and pressed the emergency alarm button, just as my friend and I had planned beforehand. He quickly snatched the phone from my hand. Then there was a crackling sound as he crushed it underfoot. I realized I was truly trapped. The police stormed into the house unexpectedly. My friend, true to his word, had taken action when he received my emergency signal. He had told me beforehand that he would alert a trusted officer in case anything happened. The neighbor began to flee, but during the pursuit, he couldn't escape our plan. He was caught and couldn't deny the overwhelming evidence. When I handed over all the footage and he was taken into custody, I lay in the hospital thinking about what I'd been through. I had come closer to death than I ever imagined. I regretted nothing. Nightmare in the dormitory. The room was pitch dark, with only a faint moonlight filtering through the curtains. Doll woke up in a cold sweat, his heart pounding as if it was trying to escape his chest. Doll gasped and sat up in bed, realizing that his roommate, Tyler, was standing over him, his face only a few centimeters away.
"Dude, are you okay?"
he asked, with a mix of worry and irritation. Doll wiped the sweat from his forehead, embarrassed. It was only their first week in college, and he had already become the roommate with nightmares. As Doll walked to class, he was still dazed from the night, the exhaustion dragging him down like lead weights. He panicked when he realized he was about to be late for class. It was only his second class, and he had hoped to sit near Lily, a sweet girl with beautiful, long hair who had caught his eye. Running to class, he deliberately chose a seat behind her and quickly found himself mesmerized. He was so distracted that he barely listened to the lecture. Just as he was thinking of how to start a conversation, his thoughts were interrupted when he was called on and reminded to pay attention. That night, he rushed back to his room, hoping his dreams would lead him to Lily, but the nightmare returned instead. He screamed again, and once more Tyler was annoyed.
"You should really get control of yourself,"
Tyler muttered. Doll reassured him it was just another nightmare. The next night, Doll sat on his bed, trying to focus on studying for an upcoming test. He worried that if he fell asleep, the nightmare would return and disturb his roommate again. But exhausted, he drifted off, and the nightmare came in one relentless wave. This time, Dahl felt paralyzed, a weight pressing down on his chest. Terror surged as he struggled to breathe, his vision obscured by wavy hair. He could feel that hair right in front of him. An overwhelming, intense feeling he had never known before emanated from a demonic presence. It appeared as if everything before him was real, desperate, screaming, unsure what to do. In his delirium, he summoned all his strength to claw at the demon's face. Instantly, he woke up, gasping for breath, and Tyler's face appeared hazily before him, shaking his head. Dahl glanced at his bed and saw his book still open. As he went to close it, he noticed an eerie coincidence. The book lay open on the page about Henry Fuseli's demon, the nightmare, and the image looked just like the creature he'd encountered in his dream. Determined to uncover the truth, Dahl grabbed his laptop and began researching. He stumbled upon a story about a demon that torments people in their sleep. He started connecting his experiences with this ancient legend, realizing it was eerily similar to his own. Suddenly, a knock on the door startled Dahl out of bed. He felt disoriented, unsure if he was still trapped in the nightmare. As he approached the door, it opened on its own. Lily stood there, her hair covering half her face. She stepped inside, moving slowly and unnaturally. A wave of fear washed over Dahl. That suffocating, disturbing feeling from his nightmares returned, tightening around his chest. Lily's expression was vacant, her behavior strange. Then, Dahl noticed something, a slow trickle of blood dripping from her face onto the floor. He asked if Lily was okay, but she didn't respond. She kept walking slowly toward him. She moved closer to Dahl, lifting her hair to reveal a bloody scratch on her face, the exact mark he'd clawed onto the demon in his nightmare. He backed away, mind reeling, body shaking, and shouted, "This can't be real." Dahl looked around the room, desperately searching for any sign of Tyler, hoping he would burst in and shake him awake. But he didn't appear. Dahl was alone. This wasn't a dream. Everything looked just like in his dreams. Darkness was closing in on his vision. Before he could react, she lunged at him, pinning him to the ground. Her weight crushed Dahl's chest, unbearable, and he heard a sickening crack as he felt one of his ribs breaking. Dahl tried to scream, but no sound came out. Her icy breath brushed his face as she leaned down, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth. The pain spread throughout his body, and his vision began to fade. His ribs snapped one by one under the crushing pressure, blood spilling from his mouth. The last thing he saw was her face contorting into a twisted, grotesque smile before everything faded to black. The ghostly tape. In a small dorm room, a typical living space for a college student, cluttered with textbooks and clothes. Each desk lamp serves as the only real source of light. Lai and Khan, two female students, are sitting on an old carpet next to the TV stand, preparing to watch a movie for their weekend break. The TV is old, seemingly from the 90s, still equipped with a VHS player. Beside the TV is an old cardboard box, filled with random tapes and outdated electronics. The box came from a trip they had taken earlier that day to a vintage thrift store. Back at the dorm, they rummaged through the tapes, laughing at the absurdity of their choices: old sitcoms, instructional videos, forgotten movies. Then, they found a plain black VHS tape. It had no markings except for a single word, hastily scrawled in faded red ink on the label: "Don't." The label was torn and dirty, as though it had passed through countless hands before. They hesitated for a moment, but curiosity quickly won them over. Lai slid the tape into the VHS player. The TV crackled to life with a sharp, screeching sound. The picture was grainy, distorted, and flickered with a buzzing noise. The first image appeared, a dilapidated house in the middle of a dark, dense forest. The camera shook as if it was being held in someone's hand. There was no sound except the rustling of leaves. The house is old and almost collapsed. As the camera moved closer, the creaking of the front door opening slowly filled the silence. Inside the house, the rooms were empty, covered in dust, old furniture draped with sheets. The air grew heavy, tense. In a long and narrow hallway, at the end was a door, slightly open. Then the screen flashed for a moment. What was happening was quite difficult to understand. The tension of the tape seemed to gradually seep into their space. A few seconds later, the camera was now in the basement, standing before a large circular symbol carved into the floor. Strange runes were etched into the surface. As they stared at it, they felt like they couldn't breathe. Then, a loud crash, and the screen jerked toward the far end of the basement. There, in the darkness, something moved. The two girls froze in place. It was tall, impossibly tall, with limbs that were too long and thin. Its face was hidden in the shadows, but its hollow eyes stared into the room. A faint whisper, barely audible, began to play through the TV speakers. But the sound quickly grew louder, more persistent, almost as if it was speaking directly to them. They seemed to be hypnotized. Lai couldn't take her eyes off the screen. Whispering like a mantra, Lai stood up and began to lose control of her body. Can called her name, but it didn't seem to reach her ears. Lai walked towards the TV, eyes glassy, body stiff. She could feel Khan's eyes on her, but she couldn't stop. The figure on the screen seemed to pull Lai closer, its long, bony fingers stretched out as if wanting to catch her. Khan gasped, backing away. Khan suddenly realized that Lai was moving like a puppet on the TV. Lai continued to move like the figure on the screen, her body twisting unnaturally, her joints cracking. Khan could only scream in desperation. Lai continued to move as shown on the screen, her body contorted in a strange way, her joints cracking. Khan could only scream in vain. Lai's eyes began to roll back and a sick, twisted smile appeared on her face. Lai turned her head and approached Khan with her arms outstretched, her fingers slowly gripping her shoulders as if wanting to harm her. Khan, terrified, tried to reach out with trembling hands to stop the tape, but failed. The image on the screen mirrored every detail of what was happening in the room. Everything felt like something had stepped out of the TV. The long, spindly fingers stretched with gray, skeletal skin. The figure moved slowly toward them, its joints cracking with every step, as if just existing in this world was painful. And then the door burst open. It was Jay, our other roommate. The sudden interruption sent a shockwave through me, breaking the trance. Lai staggered backward, her arms falling to her sides. The figure retreated into the shadows with an ear-piercing screech that only Lai and Khan could hear. Then the figure was gone. We collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath, looking at each other in shock. The only thought in their minds was to get out and never look back. They scrambled to their feet, fleeing the room without a second glance, leaving the cursed tape behind in front of a confused Jay. The noise on the TV was distorted, and the final image showed that shadowy figure coming from the basement. It thought it was screaming like it was sealed again. Maybe it almost succeeded in escaping, and maybe Lai and Khan would be the replacements. The threat of the gas station customer. Evie had been working the night shift at the gas station for many years. It was always quiet, slow, and uneventful. Her shifts usually started at 8 p.m. every day. The first few hours passed quickly, with a steady stream of customers coming in for gas or snacks. But after 11 p.m., the traffic slowed, and by midnight, the station became eerily quiet. She tried to keep herself busy, organizing merchandise on the shelves and cleaning, but there wasn't much to do. The silence and the ticking of the clock made the second half of her shift feel endless. Around 1 a.m., a car pulled into one of the parking spots near the entrance. At first, she didn't think much of it. Most cars came in for gas and left immediately. But this car just sat there. No one got out. She stood up straight behind the counter, waiting for anyone inside to come in. She leaned over the counter, looking through the glass door, but nothing happened. Maybe they were just resting? She shrugged and continued scrolling on her phone, distracted for about 20 minutes. When she looked up from her phone, there, standing in one of the aisles, was a man. He was just there, staring at her. She hadn't heard the doorbell, hadn't seen him walk in. How had he gotten inside without her noticing? The man quickly averted his gaze when he saw her looking. He appeared to be in his 40s, wearing a dark coat and a scruffy beanie. There was something about him that made her uneasy. He moved slowly through the aisles, his eyes occasionally glancing toward her, as if assessing whether she was watching him. His movements were deliberate, almost calculated. She tried to remain calm, watching him closely, but she couldn't shake the feeling that he was planning something bad. Suddenly, he turned toward the front door and hurried outside. She dashed out the door, her heart racing. The car was still parked there, but the man walked right past it, disappearing into the darkness along the road. She went straight to the security camera to figure out how he had gotten in without her noticing. She pulled up the footage, scanning through until she found the moment he arrived. The footage showed him stepping out of the parked car, but instead of going inside immediately, he stealthily made his way around to the back of the gas station. There were no cameras there, but she knew those doors were never locked because they were broken. What chilled her the most was the timing. 15 minutes passed between the moment he went behind the building and when he appeared in the store. 15 minutes he spent lurking out of sight, waiting for something. Weeks had passed since that night, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every shift felt like a test for her. One night, while she was cleaning the counters, she noticed something strange. The man entered the store, his eyes scanning as if searching for something. She watched him from the corner of her eye, and that was when she saw it. Something that seemed horrific. Then he approached her checkout, and she thought she might have guessed right. Dark stains on his sleeve, splotches that looked like blood clinging to the fabric, and he had done something vile and horrible. She wasn't sure if it was the same man, but she sensed it was him by his stature and clothing. She froze, her hands clenched, as he slowly moved down the aisle, seemingly oblivious to her stare. He quickly slipped away, melting into the shadows, and she was left in silence. She resolved to take action. The next time he appeared, she would be ready. A few nights later, he returned. She heard the faint sound of the doorbell and looked up to see him standing right inside, his face hidden in the shadows. She quietly picked up the phone, dialed the police, and kept her voice just above a whisper. She reported the suspicious man, describing his erratic behavior and the blood she had seen on his sleeve. But then, he noticed her. His eyes narrowed, and he realized what she was doing. Without warning, he charged toward her, knocking the phone from her hand. She stumbled back, grabbing anything she could use to defend herself as he backed her into a corner, his face contorted into a disturbing grin. She collided with the shelves, knocking items to the floor. She tried to grab a can from a nearby rack and threw it at him, buying herself a split second to dodge him and run toward the door. But he was quick, grabbing her arm and pulling her back. forcing her against the back of the store. I encouraged myself to survive and reassured myself that the police would arrive soon. He tightened his grip and pressed his face close to hers with a terrifying gaze. She felt panic rising, but she saw the police through the glass. One of the officers raised an eyebrow and glanced at her, then looked at the man's hand on her arm. It was a signal, a silent cue. She knew what she had to do. Gathering all her courage, she turned slightly, catching the man off guard, and bit his hand. He yelled in pain, loosening his grip just enough for her to escape. She stumbled forward, getting out of his reach. The police burst through the door, quickly advancing with their weapons drawn. He hesitated, his face contorted with anger, but he knew he was outnumbered. The officers moved in, bringing him to the ground and cuffing his hands behind his back. He thrashed, his eyes filled with rage as they restrained him. One of the officers approached her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. They said he was a dangerous man, wanted for multiple assaults and murders in the city. She blinked, the reality of his words sinking in. A murderer? The thought sent chills down her spine, and she felt the weight of the encounter heavier than ever. She nodded, grateful that he had finally been apprehended. The man hadn't just been lurking around the police station. He had been hiding, waiting, blending into the shadows, ready to strike. The police finished their reports, and she was left alone in the quiet gas station. The shelves were disarrayed, items scattered after their struggle. The man was gone, but she couldn't shake off the horror of it all. The scars he left would remain with her, a reminder of the darkness lurking just beyond the light.